Thank you very much, Chairman. Mr. Mulvaney, can we talk about the tax cuts, tax reform proposal? You just said that you assume that the tax reform plan is going to be deficit neutral. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
And your presentation to this committee states that it is deficit neutral, correct?
Yeah, basically, Senator, we had three choices, which is we could assume the tax plan, which is still in its very early stages. It's not really a plan.
So there's no scoring on it yet. That's an assumption.
Either add to the deficit, subtract from the deficit, or be deficit neutral, and we picked the third, the middle way.
And the way that you get to that conclusion is that you recognize that there will be immediate revenue reductions from lower tax rates and calculate that they will be offset by increased revenues from enhanced economic activity. And they offset each other to deficit neutrality.
With respect, sir, no, that's not the calculation we went through.
Okay, what was the calculation?
We went through the list of exclusions that are reduced, loopholes that are closed, deductions that are removed. I can't remember what the number that we assigned to the ending. The proposal includes to remove the deduction for state and local taxes, which is a huge number. We get rid of a wide variety of personal deductions, including, I think, everything except, I think the proposal has some mortgage
So
interest
your
to keep in charity.
testimony here is that you are not assuming any growth from tax revenues as a result of increased economic activity in reaching the deficit neutrality. That is all going to be tax dollars in, tax dollars out, no added growth as the basis for deficit neutrality.
I don't know if I'm agreeing or disagreeing with you, but let me tell you what we did. We assumed economic growth. Certainly it's part of the, as I mentioned in my opening statement, the assumptions that how we got to 3% growth, tax policies were part of it. And certainly when we do go to 3% growth, we assume that government revenues go up. So we assume that there is growth, but we did not use those numbers to say that the tax policy was deficit neutral.
So the tax policy, as you foresee it, will be one that is deficit neutral without regard to growth, without regard to the increased growth that you assign to the tax policy itself. There's a circularity, you know, where people say, well, we're going to change the tax code, and that is going to increase revenues, and then we're going to bake those revenues back into the tax code. That is not going to be a manner in which you achieve deficit neutrality when you get your tax code proposal together.
Again, I think we're agreeing, but just to use my own words, is that I'm aware of the accusations of double counting. I do not believe that we engaged in that.
But the only way that that becomes true is if, in fact, the tax reform proposal is deficit neutral without regard to growth from the tax proposal.
Exactly. So we are agreeing on that point. And keep in mind, when we have to make these assumptions for the budget, and in fact, we're very early on in the discussion on what a tax policy would look like. We have to make certain assumptions. And the three options that I mentioned to you were the three options we took. I guess we probably could have made the assumption that the tax policy by itself would reduce the deficit. We chose not to do that. My guess is there are some of you who would make the contention that the tax policy by itself should add to the deficit. We chose the middle way to say, look, we don't know enough about the tax policy. We know some of the basic principles of it. We're going to lower rates, we're going to simplify, but we're going to get rid of this whole host of deductions, and so some of which are massive, and said, look, the most defensible, conservative with a small c way to look at this is to say, on its own policies, those will be deficit neutral. Now, whether or not what y'all find what passing and when we negotiate with you on a final tax bill, what it looks like, I can't say, but we have to make certain assumptions early in the process to do the budget.
So when we look at your tax proposal, when it gets to a level of specificity that we can actually look at, we will be looking at growth numbers that are a constant with and without the tax code, and the deficit neutrality will be the function of changes within the tax code itself, not projections of growth.
let me look at it a different way, and again, see if we're agreeing by using different words. When we offer next year's budget, we won't be able to make those assumptions, I hope, regarding what the tax policy would look like, because we hope that it's either in law or very close to being in law. So we won't be forced with that choice of looking at some piece of paper with basic principles and trying to do the math on that, but we'll have a specific thing that we might be able to score and make more detailed assumptions regarding.
Because you do recognize that if you count the growth here in the budget, and then you count it again in your tax proposal, that is a double count, and you're saying it's not a double count because you are not going to use it twice in that way.
And I wouldn't want to come now and have to answer questions from my good friend Senator Van Hollen if I was actually double counting.
Thank you. My time has expired.